Hello and welcome back to Death and Taxes, your weekly live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I am one half of your hosting duo, John Humphreys, and joined, as always, by Gene Tunny. Gene, how you doing?
Going well, John. How about yourself?
I'm going to say I'm on top of the world, another beautiful day in paradise, because that's what I say. But the truth is, I'm a bit tired. This has been a big week for me, running from pillar to post, burning the candle at both ends. But still happy, still happy.
Well, you got to keep on top of all of the pre-budget news, and I think there's quite a lot of it that we're going to cover tonight.
Indeed. I was writing the dot points about the pre-budget leaks to come, and it ended up taking up the whole page of notes for what we could talk about today. So we'll see if we're able to get through that. Touch wood. To come, the pre-budget leaks, what's coming in the budget, by-elections, one down, one big one to go, and then another one after that in Queensland. So that's interesting things to analyze, how the Liberal versus One Nation battle is going. Big news coming out of New South Wales, the passing through one House of Parliament of a law to legalise nuclear power and uranium mining. So that could get interesting. Of course, interest rates have gone up, inflation's running high, house prices are still intolerable, and information coming out about what the cost of living actually is, because the inflation data can be quite aggregated. So I think Gene's going to give us some interesting data on that front. But before we dive into all of that, if I could ask you watching along to please give this a like, give this a share, shoot it around the algorithm. This is being simulcast live on Facebook, YouTube, X, and LinkedIn, on Gene's channel and LinkedIn, my channel on X, and the Australian Taxpayers Alliance channel on YouTube and Facebook. Wherever you are there, please give it a like. Follow us on all of those social medias. It really does help. We do take your questions, comments, criticisms. Feel free to get as generous with your praise or as cutting in your criticisms as you like. If you write it in and it is sufficiently witty or insightful, we can put it up on the screen. And we normally save most of them for the end. Although, of course, we can always put one up early just to show that we are paying attention. G'day, Ada. Excellent show so far. That's right. We have made no mistakes so far in this show. We have successfully told you our names. So thank you, Ada. So go write in your questions. We'll try to get to them at the end as best we can. With all of that said, we will have a guest today, but the guest is coming in a bit later. So we're just going to power forward without them. The guest, I should just say it, the guest is John Ruddick, the Libertarian MP from New South Wales. And he has logged in, but he has been called down to the chambers. It is a sitting week in New South Wales. Parliament is sitting. For those who don't follow politics too closely, Parliament doesn't always sit. Most of the year, politicians aren't in Parliament House, but this is a sitting week. So they're in Parliament House, and he has been called down to the chambers to contribute to a debate on some piece of legislation going through Parliament. But he will be back in a jiff, and he's going to talk to us about this nuclear and uranium bill, because that was the bill he actually put that forward. That is a John Ruddick bill, and it managed to pass through the New South Wales upper house, now to be considered in the New South Wales lower house. That could get tricky, but anyway, John Ruddick will tell us about that when he joins us shortly. So we will have a guest, but we don't have him right now. So let's dive into, often the first thing of substance we get to is normally Gene's Roundup, where if you're a normal person, you haven't been following economics closely every day, waking up first thing in the morning, immediately refreshing your browser to find out the latest economic news. Well, fear not, you can come here and for the next 10 minutes, catch up on everything you needed to know about the economy over the last week. So Gene, what do we need to know?
Yes, thanks, John. I mean, the first thing is, as we predicted, the Reserve Bank has put the cash rate up. I mean, so now we're up to 4.35, and we have, it is essentially erased all of the cash rate cuts that we had last year. So they're all gone. We're back to where we were, and we're now above UK, US, New Zealand, whereas when all the tightening was occurring to get on top of inflation, we remained well below their cash rates, their overnight money market rates, which is what I'm showing in that chart there, where the red line. So it just goes to show that because of that experiment the Reserve Bank was running, where we were trying to lock in full employment, the Reserve Bank, even though it didn't have Chalmers didn't exactly instruct it to do this, it was inspired by Jim Chalmers to try and run the economy hotter than was warranted given the underlying inflation concerns. And we're paying for it now. They haven't got on top of inflation, and interest rates are on the rise. And even the RBA's forecast, they're assuming at least one more rate rise. And, markets are predicting, well, there could even be more. Financial market commentators are predicting it could get up to 5, the cash rate. So, yeah, just a real policy stuff up from the Reserve Bank there. One of the reasons why we're in this situation where inflation has this persistence is just the large amount of lending that's occurring. So the Reserve Bank released their financial market aggregates last Thursday. I didn't get to cover them in the show last week, but that shows that lending is continuing at a high rate, particularly for investors. So property investors have really been going hard. They're borrowing lots of money, and that's been contributing to price gains, particularly in Brisbane and Perth. So what we'll see is that Brisbane and Perth are just really booming. Sydney and Melbourne, because they boomed earlier, they're moderating, but a lot of the action, well, the actions in Perth and Brisbane, they're seen as opportunities for yield still, and there's a lot of excitement about the Brisbane Olympics, and it's possible we may even be in a bubble here in Brisbane. That's what Leith Van Onselen at Macro Business is speculating, and I think there may be some validity to that. So what we have is strong growth in credit for housing, and to the extent that the new loans that are written exceed the loans that are paid down in any period, then what you have is the creation of new money in the economy. And so that's what's contributing to inflation. So what we see is that credit growth and money growth are continuing to be strong, and that's something that the RBA needs to be concerned about, and suggests that we may I think we'll have to have at least one more rate rise, possibly even 2. So we'll keep an eye on those credit and money figures. That's the totality data that I was talking about before with the house prices. The yellow line is Perth, which through the year to March, end of March, grew 26%. I mean, just unbelievable. Brisbane, that's Greater Brisbane, nearly 20%. And then we see the other, nationally, we're around 10, just under, I think around 10% through the year. And then Sydney, 4 to 5, and Melbourne only around 2 to 3. So those are Sydney and Melbourne are moderating, whereas Brisbane and Perth have just been surging. And I think that's a lot of that is the investor interest. And we can talk a bit later, John, about what the government has in store for property investors, but I won't get into that right now. But we're sure to have some words about that. So that's the totality data. Finally, one thing I found very interesting this week in terms of new data is from the Reserve Bank. It's this living cost index data, and what this is showing is that for age pensioners, if we look at what their living costs have grown at through the year, they're up over 5%. So the costs for age pensioners. So their CPI, rather than just the general CPI, which is based on an average basket of goods and services of all households, if we just look at the types of goods and services that particular groups and welfare recipients, for example, and pensioners purchase, they're actually doing much worse than the average household. And I was struck by this because this just shows the profound cost of living challenges we have in Australia, and the fact that it's disadvantaging the most disadvantaged in our community the most. And this has, this is terrible from an equity perspective. Self-funded retirees, if you look there, they're doing better than, or their living cost index hasn't risen by as much as the age pensioners or other welfare recipients. That's, according to the ABS, that's because international travel dropped in price through the year. There was, over this is to December. I mean, it will have been going up in the recent quarter because of higher oil prices. But last year, because those costs weren't as high, that group, self-funded retirees, which spends a lot on international travel, it received a benefit in terms of its CPI relative to other welfare recipients. So its CPI didn't increase as much. And you see that employees, their living cost index, so for normal employees, their living cost index, that's only about 2.5% through the year, if I'm reading that correctly, without my glasses. So given the basket of goods and services they buy, because there's more services, more discretionary items in there that are not, and probably more tech items that aren't experiencing the cost increases that, say, basic necessities and rents and et cetera, they're actually not doing as badly as the welfare recipients. So I just found that absolutely fascinating, those data, just showing just the profound problems that we've got with cost of living in Australia. And as often happens, it's those of us who are least able to deal with the cost of living increases that really are worst affected, and just reinforces the need to get on top of inflation. So, John, that's all I have. And any thoughts or reactions?
Well, the first thought I had with that data at the end, firstly, that should be far more widely reported. The fact that CPI is a useful statistic, but that shows the increase of cost of living on average. And as I used to be fond of saying, if you had one hand in a fire and one hand in a freezer, your average temperature would be good, but you would not be comfortable, right? That average temperature would be hiding a lot of the truth of your situation. And the same with CPI data. I mean, I'm not suggesting we throw that data point away, but the ability to dig into that and see specifically how CPI is manifesting in different people's lives, I think that should be far more widely seen. So thank you, Gene, for bringing that to our attention. And of course, what it highlighted is something that we've repeated a few times, where we say, yes, inflation's a bit high, but don't worry, it's only accommodation and food and electricity that's going up, nothing important, right?
Yeah,
and so that's showing up there. If you're only spending on the essentials, you are not doing well in this economy. And then, of course, suffering through bracket creep, pushing your taxes up every year as well. So, look, that was really interesting. Thank you for sharing that one. Interest rates going up. I mean, I think we'd predicted that for a while. I don't think we were alone in predicting it either. Perhaps we were alone in thinking it was the right move. Well, not alone, but there's been some criticism of the move. But I think they didn't have much choice. If we don't want to go sort of out of the fire and into the frying pan, I think it's the other way around, the saying. But if we didn't want to skip from disaster to disaster, we probably have to take our medicine now, unfortunately. And what was the other one? The house prices. Yeah, well, that's never pretty watching. But hopefully, if you remember the episode we had where Cam Murray came on and was optimistic about everything, he did promise us that those house prices will
Yes,
stabilize.
yeah, that was terrific from Cam. Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Indeed. So we do have our guest has entered the back of the studio, so we will bring him on now. As I mentioned before, we've got Libertarian MP and all-round troublemaker superstar, John Ruddick. John, how you doing?
Good evening, John. Good evening, Jane. Very well, thank you.
G'day, John. Good to see you. What I want to know is, like, you always hear this term ministerial leather. And John, you're not a minister, are you? But you have this impressive leather chair from what I can see.
Well, you know, someone told me about 20 years ago that you spend a serious percentage of your entire life in the chair. So yes. I thought, well, let's get a decent chair that sort of, lasts the years.
Oh, very good. I thought you might have inherited that from it might have been parliamentary stock, but it's your own chair. I take it. Yes, excellent. Yes. Brilliant. No, it's a very impressive chair. So, yes.
Oh, thank you.
And how did your speech go down in Chambers?
Well, what's happening is right now they're debating this bill where the government's bringing in this thing about when somebody is sentenced, they've been found guilty of a crime and they're now going to be sentenced. And we have had in the common law since medieval times this strong principle of having the judge can have some discretion about, look, there might have been a murder. One person's dead, okay, which is a massive tragedy. Now, one murder might have been premeditated for 3 years. Someone might have been, I'm going to murder this person, I'm going to plan it and everything. Now, then a murder might have also been because there might have been a really normal, good, law-abiding person and they just have a bad day and there's a crime of passion and there's a murder. Now, they're both going to go to jail for a long, long time. But if the judge now has to sentence those two people equally, well, assuming it gets through. So I'm going to be speaking against it now. But what's happening now is Parliament's got about another hour and a half to go. And I think the Greens, who are also opposed to this for different reasons, I think they're going to filibuster. So they are just going to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But when so I do occasionally, I'm just going to have to turn my head to the screen just to see if the Greens have finished, then I may have to rush down and give a 2 or 3 minute speech.
Fair enough. Did you get a chance to hear what we were talking about just before you came on the screen?
No.
Where Jean was running through the CPI data and the interest rates. You would have heard interest rates are up again today.
I did, yes.
I just want, before we move on, because the next thing I want to do is get into this uranium mining bill. But Jean, one last comment on what happened with interest rates. Of course, the Reserve Bank governor, she made some comments afterwards. And there's been a lot of political debate about what those comments mean and which side of politics gets hurt. But I just wanted to pick her up on one thing where she says, we're not going to have a recession here. We're just going to have people's wages going backwards. And then she cited a growth number that was almost certainly going to be lower than the population growth number. So again, we've talked about this one before. It looks like they are fully expecting a per capita recession, i.e. you will get worse off. And that is the only way that these words matter. Right? They were using these words to tell you whether you're going to be better off or not. And they're basically admitting you're going to be worse off. Your wages will go backwards. We're in a per capita recession. But don't worry, if we just add in a bunch of irrelevant numbers, this fake data point shows us we're not in a recession. And I am, as you can tell, getting increasingly exasperated by this stupid semantic trick being used in the media. But anyway,
I'd just say, John, the Reserve Bank's forecasting record hasn't been too crash hot lately. So, it's certainly possible we could have a full-blown recession rather than just a per capita recession. I don't even think it matters. I do not understand why anyone thinks that the total GDP numbers are interesting to the punters at all.
If there is, look, I'm old enough to remember the recession in 1990-91. I just got out of school. It was a big, big deal. You turn on the Channel 9 news at 6 o'clock, they're saying unemployment's hit 11%, and it's just everyone was talking about recession. Yeah. Now, they should be talking about that now, but they're not because it's a per capita recession. and the big states worked out how to engineer. So on paper, the final output of the system is, oh, we're not in a recession. So therefore the media says, oh, okay, we're not in a recession. But I think if doesn't change anything in anyone's life, I think it will massively change the politics of the country if we are in a recession, particularly with a Labor federal government, because most Australians have got it deeply embedded in their DNA that Labor's bad with the economy. So if we have a recession, everyone's going to say, oh, we knew we shouldn't have voted Labor. They're always bad with the economy. That's why I think Angus Taylor, I'm about the only person I know who thinks Angus Taylor's 50-50 to win the next election.
Yeah, there's so much time between now and then. I think people, they overestimate the degree to which today's politics will be the politics of the next election. So I don't know about 50-50, but I think it's crazy to write him off at this point. It's just too far out. Look, you make a good point about the politics of the situation. It got me wondering, given that a lot of our cultural elites in bureaucracy, academia, media, they do have a bias towards sort of left-wing politics. If the coalition was in power and we ran 3 years of per capita recessions, I wonder if they would have suddenly discovered the same zeal I have for admitting that it is a recession. Given that, yeah. That might have been interesting to see. Anyway, enough of that talk. Something interesting happened in your place of work yesterday, I believe, John. It's something that I think you weren't expecting to happen yesterday. But I won't take too much of your thunder. What is it that you have been getting up to in the New South Wales Parliament?
Well, I think it was 26 years ago, Dr. Humphreys, it was you who wrote our party's original manifesto, and you said, included in that was a nuclear power industry, which was, prophetic at the time. So it's something that we've been very consistent about ever since. It's such a no-brainer. But what's happened is the Labor Party has got themselves into this cultural sort of golden calf where they worship anti-uranium and anti-nuclear, and they do not think about it rationally. So what happened was about last December, and Natalie Ward is quite a senior Liberal figure here in the she's sort of like the deputy leader of the Liberal Party. And it was reported on the Sydney radio that she had told a branch meeting the night before that she's in favour of nuclear power industry. So we thought, okay, cool. Well, so we've got a senior Liberal saying that they're in favour of nuclear. Let's strike while the iron's hot. So we put up a motion. We bring it on for debate as quickly as we could. Sure enough, I get up and say, well, it's a good idea. And the Liberals get up and say, we are going to support this bill. Fantastic. So did the Nationals. Fantastic. So once we have, the upper house has got 42 members. Labor's got about 15, 16. Liberals have got about the same, maybe one or two less. Then there's there's 14 people who are part of, the ideological crazies, like me. There's animal justice, there's legalised cannabis, there's the Greens, there's 3 former One Nation. It's a real motley crew. So every bill's different. So, but once a crossbencher has one of the majors on board, you've got a chance. You've got a chance of winning. Now, usually because the right, the Liberals plus the minor right is smaller than the government plus the minor left, but we can occasionally have to win. So Liberals, Nationals have said they were voting in favour. Now then we thought it would be close. We sort of had a hunch that we'd sort of be maybe lose by one vote. Now we did sort of take advantage of something that had happened earlier this week, is that one of the Labor MLCs was suspended for 7 days. So that's when we thought, okay, let's do it right now, boys. And so we put it up, and now normally what would happen is when there's a bill has been proposed, particularly one that's reasonably contentious, like uranium mining, I was expecting this debate to just go on and on and on and on, like for months, okay, that I'd have to keep sort of bringing it back, once a month, and we could have another 45 minutes debate. And I thought that the Greens and Labor, who both hate it, would just put speakers up and they can speak for 40 minutes on a bill. And you can this is what's happening right now. There's a Green filibustering right now. She doesn't want this bill to get passed. Parliament's going to finish at 10 o'clock sharp, so she's just going to talk it out, although she's only got 12 minutes to go. So I expected that's what's going to do. So I go down there. Yesterday, we were allocated 45 minutes for other people to contribute to this debate. And now the Liberals and the Nationals and one Labor Party person had already spoken a month or two ago. anyway, so I go down there expecting for 45 minutes to hear from other members. And the president says, okay, well, we're back to the uranium bill. Who wants to have a word on it? I thought, there'd be heaps. I thought the Labor Party would stand up and say, no, we don't like it. No one wanted to speak. I thought, now there had been a little bit of a stuff up because the item that was just before me got pulled at the last moment. There was a Liberal motion to talk about something, and for whatever reason, she decided to pull it. So I think that the House was sort of caught off guard. Anyway, so what it did is it brought on the vote. Since there was no one to debate it, no more contributions, which is a big surprise. I said, okay, well, let's have a vote. Do we support uranium mining or not? And so then, we had to wait there for 5 minutes as the members shuffled in. We thought from the beginning that the swing vote would be Jeremy Buckingham from the Legalised Cannabis Party. And Jeremy came in with about 2 seconds to go and he voted with us. Okay, so now, but we won 21-19. Now, we need to, we're only halfway there. We need to get it through the lower house. Now, disappointingly, the Labor government has put out a press release tonight mocking the Liberals for supporting nuclear power. And Labor has publicly said there's no way we're going to support this in the lower house. Okay. So even if what we achieved yesterday is that, now we're going to do our very, very best to change their mind. Okay. So we've got a few little, ideas in place to change Mr. Minz's mind, but that may not be successful. But look, we've achieved something. History says at some point the Liberals and the Nationals will be back in power. Now, I know that's a little bit, history's not that reliable a guide at the moment because of other issues, one nation. But let's assume, that things do return to normal programming, okay, which 50% chance that'll happen. Well, that means the Liberals and the Nationals will come to power again at some point in New South Wales. And now they're on the record saying they support nuclear power, and they really do enthusiastically support it. It's not like I had to twist their arm or anything. So, and I'd like to thank Kelly Sloan. Kelly Sloan is the new leader. I don't think this would have happened under the last leadership. So at a minimum, we still might get it through the upper house. We've kicked off a more of a public debate on this issue, and look, all the facts are on our side. I asked the Minister for Natural Resources today in question time. I said, look, why does the government oppose this? Do you think there's no uranium, or are there other reasons? If there's other reasons, can you tell us what they are? And all she could say is, oh, well, look, I mean, the Labor Party's always opposed it, so, we're just going to keep opposing it. So that's a summary of where we're up to with the uranium bill.
Yeah. John, can I ask
what she said today? That was it was quite remarkable. She repeated it several times. We always have, and that's the reason we will. That's not a reason. Sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, John. John Ruddick, what do we know about the availability of the uranium reserves in New South Wales? Do we know what the prospects are for finding significant reserves of uranium? Well,
it has been banned since 1986 to explore for uranium. Okay.
Yes.
However, South Australia hasn't had the ban. South Australia has a booming uranium mining industry. They've got Olympic Dam there, which is the world's largest uranium mine. And you know what? Only 20% of what they get out of Olympic Dam is uranium. The other 80%, I think, is iron ore. Might be zinc or gold or something. But anyway, so now there's half a dozen to a dozen operating uranium mines in South Australia right now. They are developing two. They're very close to production in the Northern Territory. Western Australia is heading in the right direction. So your question, Gene, was, well, let's say we remove the ban. What's the point of removing the ban if there is no uranium here? Okay, well, when I was in Adelaide recently, I met with some uranium mining figures who'd been in the industry forever, knew everything about it. I asked them exactly the question you asked them, Gene. And they got out a map and they showed me where there's two big functioning, I think the US military might own one of them or something. But they're in South Australia, but they are right on the eastern side of South Australia, so they're touching New South Wales.
Right. Yeah, gotcha.
Now, these guys say, look, there's two massive commercial ore bodies there right now, and our geology says that they just continue straight on under the New South Wales border. But in addition to those two known ore bodies, well, almost certainly proven ore bodies, one of the people I met with in Adelaide said, look, wherever there's granite, there's a ton of uranium. Now, the uranium is not the type of thing you can go out gold hunting and sometimes you can find a big nugget of gold. Well, it hasn't happened to me, but I've heard about it, seen it. Okay, you don't go out and find look, there's a big big block of yellow cake. Okay, it's not.
Yeah.
I think occasionally that it's like dust. It's dust in the earth. Now you just got to get enough earth with enough dust in it, process it, and that's how you get uranium. So they say wherever there's granite. Look, I grew up in Tamworth. There was a ton of granite around Tamworth, and there's other parts of New South Wales that have got a ton of granite. You go up close to Queensland, Tenterfield, and these places, it's granite all the way. So yeah, there'll be a ton of uranium in New South Wales.
Another thing worth noting, it's a relevant question, Jim, but in terms of the law, if there was no uranium, why ban it? Still, I mean, we don't have to ban things that are non-existent, right? No one has banned the Loch Ness Monster. No one has banned the Dragons from winning any NRL games this year. They just don't exist on their own, and so you don't need to ban them. And if it did exist, if that would be a good thing, well, then at least we should be allowed to look for it. So any which way you look at it, it's incoherent. I would argue.
And look, I asked the South Australians. I asked them, look, what do you actually do with your uranium? You don't use it in Australia. They said you export it, but where does it end up? They said, oh, look, it ends up in two countries. Ends up in the United States, ends up in France. And they said, look, you just wouldn't believe the security to move it from Olympic Dam to a French nuclear reactor. Like they don't want any, terrorists or anything hijacking them or anything. It's like unbelievably secure, because, people can do bad things with uranium. Now, gentlemen, I'm going to have to be back in about 10 minutes. I think I've got to go and do this thing now.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks,
let's comment by Lyndon here. She's saying, let's refine it as well. Might go one step further.
Lyndon, our bill also calls for a nuclear power industry. Now, that's a federal government thing, okay? So we were expecting the Labor Party, well, our best hope was in the Legislative Assembly, the lower house, the Labor Party government was going to amend that bit out. But looks like they're going to
we can still hope. We can still work on it. All right, Dale, I might see you back soon.
Thanks,
Good luck.
John.
Yes, you will.
Good.
All right. You got
he's doing
thoughts on the
good
nuclear
work.
industry? Well, yes. I mean, that's a good victory. I mean, it's hard to get. Look, it's not through the whole parliament yet, and Labor looks like they're going to. They're currently intending to block it, so it may not happen. But it is, as John Ruddick was saying there. Firstly, it is hard enough to get something through one house, so that still is an achievement. And what it does is it puts this issue on the front foot. It locks in one side of parliament, so the next time. If the coalition, if I should say, instead of when the coalition get back in power, then this is on the agenda to be changed, and it gets people talking. It gets the issue one step closer. So a good victory, I think. You got any other thoughts on nuclear?
Well, I think with AUKUS, the case against nuclear power has just been really weakened, hasn't it? Because this is what they say about South Australia. There will be all of these nuclear submarines, berthed or moored or whatever they do in, off Adelaide in South Australia, and they've got nuclear reactors in them, and so we've got we've got power being generated in South Australia from nuclear reactors, and so. Why wouldn't you then have a domestic nuclear industry if you're actually going to have the reactors in your state? So I think that's a reasonable point. So yeah, I once was concerned about the safety aspects, but the people who are the technicians, I've spoken to people at ANSTO who seem really switched on, and I'm more convinced about much more convinced about the safety of it than I once was. So I'm all for it.
We actually have the data on the amount of deaths per sort of I think, gigawatt hour of energy produced or something like that. I don't know what the denominator is, but it's the deaths per energy produced. And nuclear is one of the lowest, right? So I think more people die from wind power somehow. I don't know how, but it is not a dangerous technology in that regard, if history is to be a guide. I got to say one thing on nuclear power is, and Anna's got this comment in here, by all means dig it up and sell it. but I don't know about it being dangerous. I don't agree with that part. But we do have an abundance of coal and gas. It may be that coal and gas is a cheaper way to produce electricity in Australia. So there's two different sorts of argument in favor of nuclear. One is saying we must have it, and if we must have it, perhaps the government should force it to happen, like the Dutton plan at the last federal election, the coalition's plan for the last federal election. There is another, maybe you'd call it slightly more moderate position, which is to say it shouldn't be illegal. Now, maybe it won't happen. If it doesn't happen, if it's not economic, maybe no one will invest in it. But the proposal being put forward by John Ruddick through New South Wales wasn't to subsidize or mandate or for the government to run a nuclear facility. It was to take away the prohibition. Because again, it is such a ridiculous argument. No one's been able to defend it because it is indefensible to say we need to ban something because it wasn't going to happen anyway. I mean, you just have to say the sentence aloud to see how ridiculous it is. Because these people, we shouldn't legalize nuclear because it's not economic. So you're saying we need to ban something because it isn't going to happen. It doesn't make any sense, right? Just legalize it and see what happens next. It is an odd argument. I see the. Oh, well, this is interesting. As I understand it, nobody died from Fukushima. No one died from the nuclear, right? No one died from nuclear in Fukushima, I believe. And that was a global sort of media event where everyone looking at it and screaming and pulling their hair out. And more people die annually from falling vending machines. And yet no one starts screaming and crying about the serious dangers and risks from vending machines. That is a true statistic, by the way. It's quite a fun one. A couple of people every year seem to die from falling vending machines somehow.
Well, trying to get your candy bar out, if you put the money in and it doesn't come out and people will rock the machines.
Yes, I guess so.
That would be how it happens.
Well, maybe we should start a campaign to improve safety. We need more safetyism in this country. We need the government to take away all risk. We need greater regulation on vending machines. And RW here, at this point, we already have Lucas Heights too. So it's not like we don't have any nuclear facilities.
Yeah. So that's ANSTO. That's the Australian Nuclear Science Technology Organisation run that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, congratulations to John Ruddick. He's going to come back later and join in the rest of the fun and conversation. Well, let's dive into the budget leaks, Gene, if you're up for it. We've hinted at this a little bit. The budget is coming up next Tuesday. It is always the second Tuesday of every May, or it nearly always is the second Tuesday of every May. So normally what happens in recent years, the government pre-announces nearly everything in the budget. So the budget day is becoming less exciting because there's very little that's new. So there have been lots of budget leaks. This year,
are they actually leaks, or should we call them reveals or teasers? Because it's the government revealing, like actually telling us or foreshadowing what it's going to do. It's not an actual, technically it's not a leak, is it? But everyone calls it leaks. I'm just wondering if we need a new term for it.
Yes, that might be right. But anyway, I think this year they've put out a couple of contradictory leaks on a few issues. So maybe we will find out something on the Tuesday. But we can't time travel, so we can't see Tuesday yet. We might come back to you next week if we can work out some time. But we can have a look at what they've announced so far. And I've got a lot of dot points for what they've announced here, Gene.
Okay.
And I've split them into the good and the bad and the terrible and the meh. But I want to just start because it's quite easy for people in our position. We have no natural affinity with the Labor Party. I think that's fair to say. And a lot of the people listening in are going to be getting increasingly angry at the direction of the country and therefore angry at the government. So perhaps I'll start here with the unexpected position. I think there's a few things where looks like we could really give the government credit if they happen. So I wanted to start on the positives. Now, first, and a few of these have already been locked in. One, it's just worth mentioning. They will talk about it a lot. I think it's already been legislated. But in July this year, there's going to be a slight income tax cut. The bottom rate goes from 16% down to 15%. And then next year down to 14%. I'd say, by the way, one sly prediction, look out for the possibility that the government brings forward that cut to 14%. Right. So I think that on budget night, that could be an announcement that they would be expecting to get credit for. And I would give them credit for that. They should bring forward that tax cut. It's not a huge tax cut, but it's in the right direction. And if we complain about politicians going in the right direction, they've got no incentive to go in the right direction. So kudos for that policy. Another policy they did announce at the election that apparently they're going to be going forward with at this budget is the $1,000 tax deduction. The instant you can choose to just take the instant tax deduction instead of itemizing your tax deductions, which is effectively increasing the tax-free threshold by $1,000 for many families. Right. So if you already use lots of itemized deductions, it won't help you. But if not, then that's a nice little extra simplification measure and tax cut rolled into one. So I think that's worth getting credit for. They have, and we've discussed this last week, they have looked into cutting back on NDIS spending. Now that is, I give one cheer for that at the moment because we don't know how real it is yet. We'll have to see whether it actually happens, whether they actually follow through. There is the fear that Sinclair Davidson outlined 2 weeks ago that they announced cuts. So they put the cuts into the budget and then they sort of go slow on actually doing the cuts. And so all the spending happens and we've just had this false saving. So, but at least they're talking spending cuts, right? And again, if a politician takes a step in the right direction, I think we should applaud it because we want to incentivize them to keep doing it. So kudos to them for putting NDIS cuts on the agenda. But I'm going to say that perhaps the biggest one, I don't know when this leak came out, but the government is set to make the instant asset write-off permanent. Now, that was a Liberal Party policy in the lead up to the last election. I thought it was literally their best policy, the Liberal parties in the lead up to the last election. And Labor now is set to do the same thing. Now, Labor's instant asset write-off is quite a bit smaller than what the Liberals one was. The Liberals were going to increase it, I think, to $50,000 or $100,000 of capital spending. Labor's one is $20,000. But again, it's a small step in the right direction, and you should applaud small steps in the right direction. So making that permanent is a good idea. Now, that's not a policy that most normal workers think about much or care about much. But if you're an independent contractor or own a small business, you'll know what I mean with this. This is a tax cut, allowing you to bring forward the tax cut when you invest in a piece of capital. So you can write the cost of that capital off against your income that year and pay less tax in that year. And I think that is a very good policy. And it should be increased, but making it permanent is the first step. So kudos to Labor for that one. Look, they've already halved the fuel tax. That should be permanent, but doing it at all is better than nothing. Apparently, they're going to reintroduce the loss carryback for companies. So companies that make a loss this year, but they had made a decent profit for the last couple of years. What that means is for the last couple of years, they paid plenty of tax. And now they get to this year and they might make a loss so big they go bankrupt. So the loss carryback says that if you did pay lots of tax in the last couple of years, this year when you make a loss, we'll give you back some of that tax you paid, right? So you can offset the loss now with the profits of previous years and pay the average tax, which is to say you had overpaid tax. You'll get some of that tax back, which again, I think that's a good, I would make the same case that I make with the fuel tax. It should be permanent, but at least it's there, right? Being there is better than not being there. So kudos to them on that front as well. There's some talk about a $300 tax rebate for workers. Now, people will complain that this is handouts and it isn't permanent, so it's not going to have a long-term incentive benefit. But I think it's noteworthy here that it's a tax rebate. So it's a rebate on workers, which means it will have some productivity benefit. It's not just a handout for everyone. It's a handout that is commensurate with you actually producing things, being productive and working in the economy. So that is, one cheer for that one. And look, every government does this, but they're going for efficiency dividends to try and wind back government, which will hopefully cut back a bit of the extra fat in government. So look, before I go on to all my complaints, and I do have plenty of them too, but I mean, that's a decent list of compliments to give a Labor government. So what do you think of those, Gene?
I think they're good. I think you missed one, though. What about cutting inland rail? I mean, inland rail, extending it to Brisbane, but they've essentially stopping it at Parks because they've just figured out this is just going to cost far too much money. So I mean, they probably should be complimented for that because, I mean, while I can see benefits for regional Queensland, and I know that people in Toowoomba are upset about it, and people I respect are mad that they're doing it. I can actually see the logic in doing it from an economic perspective. So I think we should applaud them for not throwing good money after bad. So that'd be one I would add to the list.
Yeah, I had that down in meh, which
oh, did you?
There's a bunch of other things.
There's billions of dollars.
I don't know enough about it, right? I mean, that was my
Okay.
that's why it's down there.
Okay.
I mean, big spends can be good spends if the return is billions of dollars. I just don't know enough about it, so
Okay.
you may well be right. The other things in that could be good is the defense spending. Like, we probably need more defense spending, but it is a bugbear of mine that there is never really any movement towards efficiency dividends in defense. Defense is able to internally be as inefficient as they like, and no one goes after them, because if a politician does go after defense to improve their efficiency, they're accused of not wanting to defend Australia. So the politics of it is so tricky. So half a tick there for trying to improve our capabilities, because clearly in modern warfare we need better drone and missile capabilities if we want to be halfway serious as a country to defend itself. So they're planning on increasing the fuel stockpile. Now I'll wait till I see the details, but that's something that at least needs to be talked about. They're winding back the fringe benefits tax discount for electric vehicles. That's probably good policy to do that. I put it in meh because I didn't want to say winding back a tax cut is a total positive.
I know what you mean.
But, it's probably the right policy. They're not getting rid of it immediately. They're just winding it back so that it covers cheaper EVs, which is probably achieving what they're trying to achieve. And they in meh, because I'm not really sure how to interpret this one at the moment. The scuttlebutt that they may introduce a 20% gas reservation policy on the East Coast. Now, again, I'd love to see the details before I go too far. And I guess the question is compared to what? Because a 20% export tax was probably going to put a lot of gas producers to the wall. So if this is the alternative, perhaps it is the better one. So those are my other meh ones. So none of those are big criticisms, and I'll put cutting inland rail in there as well. Like I say, there is more positives here to say about this coming Labor budget than I expected there to be. Now, I don't know if next Tuesday I'm going to end up then being sorely disappointed. But what are your thoughts on those?
The thoughts on, I mean, I think broadly, largely I agree with you. We've talked about what you like and what's meh. We haven't talked about what you hate yet, have we?
No, we haven't. So look, I do worry, by the way, that one of the tactics of politics is to front load all of the bad news and then on budget day give all the good news. So perhaps from Labor's perspective, everything I like is considered to be bad news, and they front loaded it. And they're going to do what they think is good news, which I'll hate on budget day. So I tread carefully until we actually see the budget. But yes, there's stuff to complain about as well. So look,
I think there's a lot to complain about. Really, I mean, essentially they're going back on commitments they've made. You could accuse them of reigniting the class warfare, and there's all of this language about, I mean, intergenerational equity, which is rather self-serving. So, yeah, I think there's quite a lot that we can be critical of.
You take the lead on this, then. What is?
No, it's your list. I'm just. I'm just. No, but I'm just saying. I think it's extraordinary because before the last election, I mean, have you seen all these supercuts of the PM and the Treasurer saying that we're not going to touch negative gearing? They're asked straight out, negative gearing or capital gains tax. Will you cut them? And the Prime Minister goes, no, absolutely, it can't be any clearer. It's not as if, at the moment we're not planning on it, or I mean, they said that as well. So they could probably say, well, we weren't planning on it then, but now we changed our mind because of these circumstances. There are clips of them being unequivocal on that. I mean, and we know politicians will, they always do this. So, I mean, it's not as if they're unique in that regard. I mean, all governments tend to do that. But, now there's this talk about intergenerational equity. And I mean, obviously we should be concerned about that. But I just don't think what they're doing is necessarily good in that regard, because while it might make properties cheaper at the margin, and it may enable some more people into home ownership, I think it's going to have very adverse impacts on the rental market, and that's going to, severely affect those people who are stuck in the rental market. So I'm not a big fan of what they're talking about with negative gearing and CGT. We still need to see what it looks like. There's a lot of speculation about grandfathering. They may allow negative gearing for people who have only one or two properties, and they're going to crack down on the people with multiple properties. But certainly they're going to get rid of the 50% CGT discount, and they're going to go back to indexation, as we've talked about earlier. So I think that's one of the big ones, and I think it's very risky, and I'm not a big fan of what they're proposing.
So the main two things you were saying there, I just got a notification that my X account has been hacked and someone else has been sending everybody a bunch of stupid messages. So if you're watching this and getting messaged by my account on formerly Twitter, now X, apologies, that's not me. I'm here live with you. But I just went to log into it there and I can't log in. So someone has hacked my X account, you bastards. With that said, so it seems like the two things you were mentioning there was the change to capital gains tax and the negative gearing, which clearly they lied. I think we all knew they lied. It's politicians lie all the time, and I know it's not a good thing. We should still call them on it. They should still, suffer some electoral penalty for it. I am far more interested in whether the policies are good or bad, and I don't think they're good. But that's where my focus will be on that. However, I've always thought the negative gearing debate was a bit daft. The first thing is negative gearing decreases the incentive to have investment properties, so therefore the rents would go up. But it only if people are selling their investment properties, by definition, someone else is buying them. And as long as that person buying it lives in Australia, then that's one fewer renters. So either they were a renter that bought their own home, so the demand for rental properties also goes down with the supply, or that's another investor, in which case it's still on the market to be a rental property. So there's that part, but more to the point, which is, and when I say this is the reason I say just keep negative gearing. More to the point, serious investors will simply be able to own properties through a company or a trust. And then they would be able to write off all their expenses that way. So I think there are workarounds to this. So, which means it's not going to work anyway. And if it's not going to work, why bother doing it, right? And also, I would say, look, we just need to be consistent with how we treat these things. If you make a capital loss elsewhere, then all different types of capital loss should be potentially treated the same. So, look, I'm not that fussed either way with that. I think the CGT has a greater potential to cause real damage if they get it wrong, but I don't actually know what they're doing yet. Are they cutting the?
No, they're indexing. Yeah. So instead of 50% discount, yes. Yeah. The Chalmers confirmed that earlier in the week. So it's going to be indexation. And so what is happening? And so who is really outraged about this is the startup community, because they're very much going to get smashed by this, because if they've got a company that's initially valued, hardly anything because it's a startup, and then that gets indexed at inflation, and then when they sell it, there's this huge, and they make this big capital gain, and the vast majority of it is going to be subject to tax, whereas previously there would have been, the 50% discount on the capital gain, but now because they're indexing that initial value or cost base to inflation, and it's hardly anything, then so they're very concerned about what this means, and so I think that's probably I'd say they're stakeholders of the government that they didn't expect would be adversely impacted. Maybe they didn't think about that, and so they're copping a bit of criticism from those groups in the financial review.
The VC community would be the similar area, right? The venture capitalists. That's always been the biggest problem with a change like this. But there are some specific VC related laws that potentially could be used to quarantine VC venture capital investments and mean that they don't have the same taxes applied to them because of the nature of the high risk of what they're doing. So that it would be interesting to see if the government goes down that path. As people would have heard me say before, in my opinion, if you're switching to indexing, it should be inflation plus, not just indexing the asset price to inflation, but index the asset price to inflation plus, say, 2% or something that compensates you for the time value of money. And I think if they were to do that, you would find most average investments ended up paying less capital gains tax under my proposal. So I'm concerned that if you just index to inflation, the only winners are people who make bad returns. And people with normal or high returns will end up paying more tax. Under my proposal, I think everyone who makes bad returns or normal returns would pay less. And still, some people who make high speculative gains would end up paying more. And I think that how you treat the people making those normal returns is important, right? Normal returns should be, people earning normal returns shouldn't be taxed too much. So. But anyway, I grant you, those aren't in the good category. I actually think there's a worse policy that they're on the cusp of introducing. It's the one that'll annoy me the most. And that is a minimum 30% tax on trusts. So I haven't seen much discussion of this, but this is the one that bothers me potentially the most of these. We'll see what the CGT one looks like. So we've just talked before about family tax and the idea of income splitting. And as I mentioned at the time, some people already have income splitting because they use trusts. And so I argued, why not let everybody access that? That is a good thing, but poorer families can't really access it. So why don't we allow everyone to access the same benefit that upper middle class and wealthy people can access? And the government heard that same imbalance, and instead of giving everybody the good thing, they've decided to take the good thing away from wealthy people, which is not the direction that I would have suggested going. This is, by the way, what Allegra Spender suggested in her reforms, her anti-family tax policy. Looks like Labor is copying Allegra Spender's anti-family tax cut policy by introducing a minimum 30% tax on money that comes out of trusts, which basically takes away income splitting for most points. Now, what that's going to immediately do is give people a high incentive to shift all of their trusts into companies. So you transfer your assets from trusts to companies, which not everyone will be able to do easily at the moment. But from here going forward, everybody who wanted to set up a trust will instead just set up a company and achieve a lot of the same benefits anyway. So we're just creating all of this extra paperwork and bureaucracy, which doesn't seem like a great idea to me. And we're making it harder to go in the right direction on tax, because the right direction would be better family tax policy with income splitting. So that, I think, is what I put in as the terrible. I put in the CGT and the negative gearing as bad, and I put this one in as terrible, because this is the one that bugs me the most. Look, they've also said they're going to spend more. They'll just throw more money at Medicare, which is a very Labor thing to do. But in this environment, I don't think we're in a position to be spending more. Medicare is huge as is. Something needs to be done to structurally reform Medicare, not just keep trickling an extra couple of billions dollars on top every year. But it is a Labor government, so perhaps that's not a surprising part of what they're doing. I had that in as bad, not terrible, because it's kind of predictable. But
do you have any ideas as regarding what needs to be done to structurally reform Medicare?
What I've for a long time suggested with Medicare is the government should set it up as a government insurance provider, and they should put on the sticker price. So work out what the average price would be for everyone. At the time I worked it out originally, it was about $3,000 a year to cover their costs for offering their Medicare services, and charge everyone $3,000 to join Medicare, make it compulsory to join Medicare, and then give everyone a $3,000 voucher and say that you have to join something like Medicare. So you'll notice to start with, nothing's changed. But what you've done is you've set up a structure where you could then allow other insurance providers to compete against Medicare. And over time, you could, when we just can't afford it all, you can still have a Medicare system, and it might be the cost of Medicare goes up to $3,020, but the voucher stays at 3,000, and that would be a way to get healthcare costs under control and ensure some amount of private contributions to healthcare costs. But the first step there would simply be to voucherize it without anybody being worse off. It also makes it transparent. Every year, you would actually get a document, a statement saying that this $3,000 worth of healthcare you're getting. You're paying $3,000 of tax in order to get this. This tax is coming back to you in a $3,000 voucher. People may see that and think, you know what? There's potentially I could have achieved better healthcare for myself if I had control over my own $3,000. It also allows you to means test it, by the way. So Gina Reinhart doesn't necessarily need the same $3,000 voucher. If you gave it as a voucher, people might start looking at that going, wait a second, does everybody need that? Perhaps a lot of people in the country could just get a $3,000 tax cut and then go without the $3,000 voucher, and you could get rid of hundreds of billions of tax welfare churn. But the only way to be able to do any of that, the transparency, the reducing the churn, the controlling the spending, first you have to just make it transparent. So my first step would be turn it into a proper insurance scheme and voucherize it. No one's worse off, and you're set up to be able to improve the system in the long term.
Right.
The whole system at some stage. Did you have any other policies coming out of the budget that you think are worth our attention?
No, I think you covered the major ones. I mean, the things that I've been thinking about and focused on. So, I thought the inland rail was the one that really surprised me, and I mean, I can see why they did it now. I think we need state governments now to just work out where they're just throwing good money after bad. I mean, Victoria should be, I mean, they've got that crazy suburban rail loop, haven't they? I mean, that government just doesn't have any spending discipline. We've got, I mean, Queensland, I think we've got to really just really crack down on our Olympic spending. I mean, I'm very concerned that we're talking about legacy. We want to make sure we've got a great legacy from the Olympics. I mean, fair enough, but I mean, I think we're going to end up with this bad legacy of additional debt. So any positive legacy we have to compare against the negative legacy of additional debt and additional burden on future generations. So yes. So look, I mean, I think government's doing some good things, but there's a risk that, it's going to be a very political budget. Jim Chalmers thinks he's on a winner here with this intergenerational equity angle, but I think it's going to backfire on them. But it'll be fascinating to watch it all next Tuesday night.
Yes, it will. We'll try to get back here to cover it when it comes out. And we'll have to keep a close eye on whether they have done anything to address that issue of startups and VCs.
I think there's a chatter about that, and I expect they will. There'll be some sweetener for them, because that's a sector that the government is very much focused on, and some of their stars, people like, Andrew Charlton, I think, is very close to that sector, and I'm sure he's going to be lobbying Chalmers to make sure that sector's looked after.
By the way, he's getting no love for the Olympics in the chat.
Yeah, I love it.
The Olympics. Olympics is great for parasitical corruption. Look, I think that the worst thing that happened with the Olympics is the idea that every host had to outperform the last Olympics, and they were all searching for this magical sentence. This was the best Olympics ever, which is a bit of wankery that we really don't need. I mean, we need to be able to have an Olympics without being able to make that city bankrupt each 4 years, right? All you need to do is let people run and swim. Right, you don't need to outdo with all of these glamorous, over-the-top shenanigans. So if they could just get back to running and swimming and doing the sports, then cities could host the Olympics without us going through all of this drama. But I don't know.
But this was supposed to be what Brisbane was about. So when Anastasia Palaszczuk initially announced it, it was all going to be done cost-effectively. We were just going to do this, we're going to upgrade the Gabba. And that was fair enough, because the Gabba probably needed upgrading anyway. And it wasn't going to cost the state much at all. We were going to use a lot of the existing facilities from the Commonwealth Games. But then suddenly, we get the Olympics, yay. And then suddenly we do these feasibility studies, or we do the initial scoping work, and we work out, actually we can't use these existing facilities. So they didn't do the pre-work, which to actually check that what they were promising the IOC and the people, that they could do it cost effectively. They hadn't actually worked out they could do it. It just absolute, just a schmozzle, just really poor government there. I mean, just anyway, but I think we all sort of agree that these Olympics are a bit of, a terrible waste of money. But look, they're going ahead, so just got to make the best of them and make sure they don't cost the state too much. So
the other big infrastructure spends that we need to get control of, both at the state and the federal level, is all of this renewable energy infrastructure. So a lot of those just need to be straight in the bin, or at least reimagined somehow.
I think a lot of that's the off-budget stuff, isn't it, John, at the federal level? Because the state government, I mean, I know the state government does have clean code, but a lot of the,
it may be off budget, but it's still driving, it's still putting extra money into the economy that isn't being offset elsewhere, so contributing to inflation. And more to my concern, it's still driving up construction prices, therefore making it harder and harder for people to afford housing. So it's still something that needs to, I mean, well, I don't even know if that inland rail thing was off budget. It may well have been, but it's...
Well, it was a GOC. It was a PNFC.
Well, then it's off budget.
But I mean, there's still this PNFC that's got all of this this borrowing, this debt attached to it. So, I mean, the government's ultimately going to have to, taxpayers ultimately going to have to, cover it, aren't they? So for all of the capital spend that's occurred so far. Yeah.
All right. So election, we're going to see if we can come back and cover, the budget. We're going to see if we can come along back next week and cover the budget. It's probably worthwhile pointing out as well, as of next week, we won't have a show next Thursday. We won't have a show for the next, we're taking a hiatus for about a month for several reasons, one of which being that I will be at army training for a lot of that time. So I won't have access to a computer. But we'll see if we can get back after the budget. But before I run away on Thursday, no promises. We'll get there when we do. But you don't even need the budget now because you've listened to us for the last half hour. So slight change of pace, the newsletter. So if you're a regular listener, once a week you get an email from myself, from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, covering some issue for that week. If you are on our mailing list, you would have received it today. If you're not on our mailing list, can I encourage you to please go there, AusTaxpayers, AUSTaxpayers.substack.com. You can find a link from our website, taxpayers.org.au, and you can sign up for free there. And it's just the one email a week to keep you in the loop. You can also sign up as a paid member, which we'd very much appreciate. It helps us to keep the lights on, but you can access the newsletter with a free subscription. So this week, the topic was, and we might be able to actually get into an argument for once about this one, Gene. I framed it as a bailout for old media. The technical name is called the News Bargaining Initiative, which is named very well if your goal is to send the listener to sleep or make them thoroughly uninterested in what's happening, which perhaps is the goal of these things. But if you called it just a massive bailout for dying old media, you might get a very different reaction and people might tune in and see what's happening. So effectively what's going on here is old media is dying, right? The internet has taken over. You're watching us on the internet right now. Everyone's got apps on their phone and is doing everything differently. And one of the consequences of this technological revolution has been that old media is being replaced by digital platforms and citizen journalists. And this is revolutionizing the way we share information. And it is significantly taking away kind of the power of old media. It's taking away their revenue model. So old media companies are shrinking, and it's taking away their control over the narrative, their ability to gatekeep the conversation. You go back through nearly all of the 20th century, there's only a few key media oligarchs that were able to gatekeep what went into mass circulation. You could talk to your neighbors or your footy team or whatever, your family, but if you wanted to reach thousands or millions of people, the only way to do that is to get past a couple of key gatekeepers. And so they had not just a big revenue stream and a nice big business, they had an immense amount of power, very real power. Now, not direct political power, not even economic power, but narrative power. And because it's harder to touch or see it, it can sometimes be mistaken for being not a very important type of power, but I would argue it is. It's a crucial one. It really goes, hand in hand with those other types, economic and political power. And that narrative power was concentrated very narrowly. The internet has come along, it's blown that up, right? And that's old media is losing their revenue model and is losing their control over narrative. And it's a very different world. Now, some people are adjusting and getting used to it. Some people are loving it. There's a lot more voices out there. But of course, as you'd be able to guess, old media isn't a big fan, right? And this is not unique to old media. We've seen this play out time and time again. Economists reading, the history of economics, you see this. There's technological innovation. The old industry is suffering through competition with a new innovative startup or a new competitor, and they're losing market share. They're losing power. They're losing revenue, and they've got the options of trying to adapt to the new technological situation, or, and tell me if you've seen this one before, go to the government and ask for a big subsidy or a bailout or some sort of benefit or a tax on their competitor or to ban their competitor. Like originally taxis tried to do when Uber came in. It might seem ridiculous to us now that the government would ban Uber, but that was the first reaction from taxis and the government, is to step in and ban Uber because it's a new technology that was undermining the old system and the old established players. So, of course, the old media big media has gone to big government and said, why don't we tax our competitors and give us a big subsidy? And big government has said, ace, that sounds great, let's do that. They've, of course, realized that if they just went to the public and said, hey, I don't like competition, could you tax my competitor and give me a multi-million-dollar bailout? It might not be very popular. So, of course, as is always, as with the taxi industry, as with every old industry that's being replaced by technology, they have a cover story. And if you pay a smart economist enough money, they can come up with a smart-sounding cover story for nearly anything. Right? And I used to do this as a test, as a trick to my students when I was a lecturer. So I say, give me any position you want an argument for. And I would come up with a half convincing sounding argument to justify nearly anything. Gene, maybe I'll challenge you to do that to me live on air and see if we can find a justification for nearly any position and its opposite. Now, that is not to say all economics is bullshit. That's to say that an economist with a loose enough grasp on morality can make convincing sounding arguments for a politician to sell to the public. And what we've got here is that there's a positive externality from old media because gatekeeping, the thing that stops us from accessing the media, from you and I, from being citizen journalists, gatekeeping is a crucially important thing that creates a positive externality because it ensures that us dumb sheep voters only see the correct information and we're not tricked by misinformation. And because we see the correct information, that will improve social harmony and make our democracy work better. So that's John, basically it. I think it is, the technical term in economics is bullshit because it is certainly true. And it's the last point, Jane, and then I'll come back to you for the full critique.
Okay.
It is certainly true that decreasing the power of the gatekeepers and opening up the news sector to everybody has created a lot more voices, a diversity of different voices, and some of those voices are full of shit. Right? There is plenty of misinformation in the world. There's lots of people are saying lots of different things. Some of them are wrong by definition. That is certainly true, right? And that's what people point to. Every dangerous and misguided argument, if it's to be truly dangerous, has to have a hint of truth. Otherwise, no one will believe any of it. And that's the hint of truth in what the defenders of the status quo are saying. With a great diversity of voices and free speech, some of those people are saying the wrong thing, and some people could get tricked by it. True. The issue there is that argument really only holds weight if you believe the gatekeepers really do point us more effectively towards the truth. And I've got to say, I see very little track record of that. I think voters and the public are entitled to be quite skeptical and jaded about the role of the mainstream media gatekeepers, especially in light of recent years. And the only reason we really know that they've been lying to us in recent years is because we had these open tech platforms and citizen journalists who brought it to light. And people sometimes say, oh, the media used to lie to us less in the 90s or in the 70s. No, they just got caught less because we had no way to catch them because they had complete control over the narrative. So I think it is true that a diversity of voices leads to some misinformation and confusion, but that is equally true when you have the gatekeepers. And with the gatekeepers, it is true and it is dangerous. And if those gatekeepers only have their power because they're being given to it by government subsidies and bailouts, it also undermines the independence of the media and creates this unholy alliance between the government and the media that undermines their whole role as keeping politics honest. So anyway, that's the pitch. That's why I think this is a bad idea. The news bargaining initiative should be shot on site, buried and cremated, or whatever else Tony Abbott said. And we should not be bailing out or subsidizing old media at all. Gene, I want to get your response to that. I've just seen John Ruddick has joined us. I'll bring him on stage and then not let him speak yet. And Gene, you have a go at ripping holes in my argument.
Yeah.
So, welcome back, John. But take it away, Gene.
Yeah, John. Okay,
Right.
yeah. Thanks, John. So I think we should separate two things, okay? So, look, I agree about the old media. So we shouldn't necessarily subsidize them, but there possibly is a case for what is it? Is it 2.5% tax on revenue of these companies? There could be a case for that. Is that
a tax would then be lowered if they're putting that tax on? They're saying they're going to charge you that tax, but if instead the companies pay a massive subsidy to old media, the government will take the tax away.
Well, okay. So maybe there's a case for getting additional money out of the big tech companies because arguably they've been taking advantage of, licensing fees or all the, the transfer pricing that goes on with multinational corporations. I think these big tech companies are particularly skilled at that because it's all intellectual property, right? And it's hard to value. So look, I mean, there may be a case for trying to extract more tax out of them because arguably they've been avoiding it and they're foreign corporations, so why not? So I think there may be a case for that. And then why you seem to be, I agree about the old media. Let's not give a handout to Murdoch or to Fairfax, but couldn't there be a case, given the public good nature of the news, to have some support, but have a fairer way of distributing it and have a way of distributing it that it actually can benefit the independent media? So it's not just going to go to Fairfax and to Murdoch, because look, I agree with what you've said about those companies. So isn't there a public good that is created from the news? There is this positive externality that you refer to. And isn't it the case that there may be some tax avoidance by the big tech companies, and we may want to have some integrity measure like that to make sure that they're paying their fair share, so to speak? So that's what I would say. So yeah, I mean, I think I agree with some of what you say, but not all of it. So
let me take that in three parts. So one thing I agree with you totally,
Okay.
which is that there are two different topics going on here. One topic is how much should you tax digital platforms? And then there's another question, which to my mind is quite a different question, which is how big should the bailout be to billionaires running old media empires? All right. So,
well, I think
I understand you'd want to structure it. You'd want to structure it differently. All right, but I was being cheeky. How big do you want the bailout to be to media? So those are two different questions, and it seems to me vanishingly impossible that the correct size of a digital platform tax is exactly the same as the size of the bailout to the media industry. But that's what this policy is.
Yep.
It sets them as the same thing.
Yep.
Which, if they were being honest, they'd say, let's have a tax here, let's have a subsidy here, argue for them both on their own merits. If they did that, I think they would find they are less popular policies. So they bundled them together as a political trick. So I agree with that point. They're two different issues, but that's another argument against the news bargaining initiative, because the news bargaining initiative has bundled them together in what I would argue is an incoherent way. So that's the first point. The second point on how much should the digital services or digital platform tax be? Look, I think that's a worthy discussion. The transfer pricing is a good point. I would say the best way to fix transfer pricing is to address transfer pricing, not to just tolerate a mistake in one part of the tax system and try to make up for it by putting in a different sort of tax in a different part of the system. Let's try to address transfer pricing. The other thing I would say about this, look, I'm not going to lose any sleep over a tax on digital platforms. That's not my main concern. My main concern is the bailout of old media. But I would point out, realistically, when you tax someone, there's a difference between who hands over the money and who suffers the consequence from a tax. Right? So that you've got to look at what the consequences of the tax would be. And if you put a tax on a company, it's paid by one of three groups. It could be the shareholders in that company, and that's what everyone assumes, right? And that's possible. Or it could be the consumers of that company, or it could be the workers in that company. And so often it's all three. Now, the workers in Facebook and Google, people aren't going to care that much. Most of them are overseas. The owners, people aren't going to care too much because they're overseas. But realistically, the most likely person end up paying the cost of this tax will be the users in Australia. And when I say users, I mean anybody who wants to advertise through X or YouTube. Just the cost of advertising through the platforms is likely to go up to cover this revenue, to cover this tax. So that's who we're actually taxing. We're taxing Australian advertisers. And most people probably have very little sympathy for Australian advertisers too. But let's be clear about who we're taxing here. We're not really taxing Facebook and Google. We're taxing Australian advertisers. What should that tax be? Look, I'm open-minded. We could have that discussion, but it's being smuggled in the back room in this legislation. Lastly, the idea of equally allocating the subsidy, I don't know how that can actually ever be done. I mean, when these subsidy schemes are put into place in any industry through all of history, they go to the established players. They inherently bias the system against the startup because the startups aren't there yet. Right. And it's harder to get there if the established players are being subsidized. So if I just say I'm starting a blog, could I apply to the government to get a couple of $1,000s of this subsidy? They'll laugh me out of the room. And they probably should, because it would be too easy to abuse. Sorry?
Wouldn't you use the metrics? We'd use subscribers or viewers or hours.
How do you get there? How do you get there? The other people how do you get there? How do you get to the subscribers and users? So that your competitor is getting a subsidy and they've already got an established audience. If you're a startup, you don't have the established audience yet, and you're not getting the subsidy. I mean, that's a foot on the scale. That's a big, heavy government-sized foot on the scale against any new competitor. It's a clearly anti-competitive measure to protect the incumbent. And I am skeptical of anti-competitive measures that protect the incumbent. But your first point, I think, is a very good one. They are two different topics going on here, smuggled together. Mr. Ruddick, I don't know if you've been following this back and forth about the news bargaining initiative. If so, do you have any thoughts?
Well, look, I have been following it a little bit. I did. Look, the comment I would like to make is that the more media, the more news sources, the better. Now, even if it's 90% is fake news, it doesn't matter, because as long as there's a free discussion of ideas, I am confident that with time, now it can take decades, can take centuries, but if we have a absolutely free exchange of ideas, the truth will rise to the top. Now, it's a little bit like, what is the perfect human diet? We've only really been thinking about it for about 100 years, maybe 200 years. Prior to that, people just sort of ate what was there. Okay, that they just sort of ate. They didn't really think that much about their diet. Now what's happened is there's been a billion wacky versions of a diet out there, okay? And the consensus is in the 1970s that margarine and salt's good for you. Then 10 years later, it's not, okay. Who knows what the truth is? But my view is if there's no sort of censorship around dietary instructions, because it's not, politicians only want to bring down the violence of the state to shut up people that damage their position. Okay, so who cares about diets, right? It's not a political issue. So what we see when people debate diets is that there's just like all sorts of crazy stuff goes out there, but there will also be within it very, very good advice. And that's what I think that's what a free market of ideas, political ideas, would look like with a zero government interference. It means that, yeah, the stupid ideas will be in circulation, but they will lose with time.
I'm going to put a slight spin on that. Maybe more of a black-pilled version. I'm not convinced that the truth necessarily wins in the open battle of ideas. The way I would frame it, though, is with an open battle of ideas, at least truth has a fighting chance. Whereas if you centralize narrative control in the hands of a few powerful people behind closed doors in a basement in New York somewhere, or wherever they're hiding, in the Bilderberg group, or insert conspiracy theory here, doesn't even need to be a conspiracy theory. You centralize that much power in the hands of a few people, I just don't think there's any chance the truth wins out in that environment. That's a guaranteed loss. With an open battle of ideas, at least truth stands a chance because it's on the playing field, and I'm not confident we necessarily win, but I'd prefer to play a game where we can win than a game where we don't even have a chance of winning.
Well, John, I'm optimistic. I mean, we're on the side of Galileo and Voltaire, aren't we? And I mean, I think history shows that we've gone away from superstition, and we've had the Enlightenment. We believe in progress, and now we're part of that pushback. We're part of the fight against of mysticism, of superstition, of extreme religion, and we're for rational ideas, and we're against all of the crazy ideas and that want to hold us back. So I think we're part of that, and that's our mission. And I remain optimistic. So I think the truth. I agree with John. I think truth wins in the battle of the ideas ultimately. Maybe not at any point in time, but in the long run for sure.
Well, we're both John, because I'd say I agree and disagree. I think you were agreeing with John Ruddick.
Yes.
I agree that the three of us in this room are motivated by reason and rationally pursuing truth. I don't think that history just points in that direction. I think it goes in cycles. I don't believe that we are free of mysticism. I think climate change is effectively a modern religion. People seem to have this innate need to believe in something big and existential. And so they gravitate to something. And I worry that we're actually now gravitating to a less sensible version of a big existential, which we might get very deep into religion soon if we keep up this conversation. But I agree, we should be pursuing truth. I don't think history is just one arrow pointing in one direction towards it, because I think the baddies can win.
They probably win more often than not. But look, if we date the beginning of civilization to about 3000 BC, and we have that's the distinction between prehistory and history, is when people start writing things down. Very basic, but so we've been around for about 5,000 years. Look, I think the long-term trend, if you look at it on a macro scale, things are getting better. More truth is being. Look, the poor old people that built those pyramids, which are beautiful buildings, of course, but I mean, gee, that's a hell of a lot of human hours went into these. Probably 1 billion hours, to build a gravestone. I mean, this is right at the beginning of civilization. That was pretty wacky stuff. Okay, and even if I think the latest scholarly consensus on the Egyptians is that they weren't slaves that built it. They were people who voluntarily did it. Okay, so it was just, it's a magnificent monument, but I mean, it's pretty crazy that we did all that. So I'm just saying, people were really easily tricked back then. I think that now, the internet's the greatest thing mankind's ever achieved. I think, in the 1970s and the 1980s, 1960s up until sort of about the 1990s, people have forgotten it, but cults were quite a big deal. Okay, particularly. A lot of various cults. I'm talking Hare Krishna and very radical Christian groups, and they were sort of all over the place, right? And then Christianity Today, which is sort of like the establishment of mainstream Christianity, they wrote an article in about 2005, and they said, "Where have all the cults gone?" That was the name of the article. It was a very interesting article, and I thought, yeah, that is right. I mean, you used to hear about kids that would sort of get involved with some wacky cult. It would happen. Now, is it happening now? Well, it's happening a lot less. It's not entirely not happening. Now, why would that be? Well, I think it's because what would happen in the 1970s when you didn't have the internet and someone knocks on your door or whatever, you might be in some type of a crisis, and you hear about some new religion and there's a charismatic leader and they're saying some fantastic claims and stuff, and you can sort of a small percentage of people will get into it, okay? Well, now those people say, that's an interesting claim, I might check that out on Google. And then most of them think, oh, okay, so these guys are basically just, sexual perverts and trying to steal money off me, and they're really controlling and manipulative, and they take all my assets. Okay, so that's what will happen now. So these things don't get off the ground.
Yeah, look, I agree with an open marketplace of ideas. We have a much better ability to be able to find the truth if you're looking for it. Whereas in the past, you were able to fall into situations, we've lost JR, where the cult leader effectively took over the whole system, controlled the narrative, and he's back. And if they controlled the narrative, everyone just accepted it, and that's all they had. So look, open marketplace of ideas is a good thing because it gives us a fighting chance. I don't think it's inevitable that we win. I don't think history goes only in one direction. I think it's a modern Western perception of history, because we had the Renaissance and then the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and then now the internet revolution. It does look in one direction. That's why Francis Fukuyama wrote the end of history in the last man in the end of history, or the other way around, because it looked like it was in one direction. I think better understanding the arc of history would be following along Chinese history, and they ebbed and flowed. They went up and down many times, like that, and they had many great periods followed by a lot of strife. And I don't think it's inevitable that we avoid strife in the future. I don't think we're at the end of history, and things can go bad. If we lose the arguments, Western civilization could go into retrograde. So I think it's something to be careful of. And the reason I bother even making this argument is because I think if people assume it's always going to go in the right direction, perhaps they will fight less vociferously. And I'd like to warn people that if we don't fight to win the case for the truth in the right direction of civilization, we could lose. We can't just say, oh, look, the goodies always win. I saw the Hollywood movie. We could lose. And so that's a call to arms.
You mentioned the Chinese. The ancient Greeks did actually have sort of advancing technology, but then they sort of got into wars and blew it all up. But the Romans were a great power for about 800 years. And historians have noted they just did not have technological progress. They were static. Whereas I really think the big, massive turning point was Gutenberg. And the History Channel did rank on New Year's Eve 1999. So it wasn't just New Year's Eve. It wasn't just the end of a decade or a century. It was the end of a millennia. Big deal. And the History Channel had a 4-hour special on the 100 most influential people of the last 1,000 years. So it doesn't include Jesus or Muhammad or Confucius. It's just the last 1,000 years. And it's very, very interesting. It's available on the internet. I encourage people to watch it. Now, obviously, it's subjective. Look, they put Elvis Presley in there, right? This was in 1999, okay? I don't think Elvis Presley belongs there, okay? But and Bill Gates was in there. They say, oh, this guy's brought computers into us, okay? So it's obviously highly subjective, but it was academically and scholarly pretty impressive, okay? They had a ton of quality people to say, and they like about 300 impressive people, mainly historians, but also, political figures and others, put in their list, okay? And the person that came first, I'll give you the top 5. William Shakespeare came 5th. Charles Darwin came 4th. Martin Luther, Protestant Reformation, came 3rd, because they said, look, he's the guy that sort of told us you don't have to listen to a priest to think for yourself. Not just about religion, but he did say just about religion, but then it flowed into everything else. So I thought that was an interesting angle. Isaac Newton, 2nd, but it was Johannes Gutenberg in the sort of the late 1400s in Germany, who didn't do much in his life, but he worked out movable type, okay? And I know the Chinese are trying to do a bit of printing, but Gutenberg, I don't understand the mechanics of it, but Gutenberg basically said, because what did we do before Gutenberg? It was unbelievably complicated. You write a good book like Marco Polo Travels to Asia, which was about 200 years before the Gutenberg. That was a bestseller. People had to scribes had to write it out, and it's a long, long book, okay? The Bible, all these books, every book before Gutenberg had to be handwritten out, yeah? So that meant there just weren't that many books. It was physically impossible to create that many books. Mr. Book Gutenberg comes along, bang, bang, unlimited knowledge. Now, I do think I think that since then, John, I think we then absolutely can. I'm with you on Chinese history. I'm with you. The Roman history is similar to what you're saying. And it was sort of chaotic prior to the printing press. But I think we can clearly say, since that moment, since the printing press, and Luther was only a generation later, and he lived not far away from Gutenberg, but that was just a coincidence. I think we can say in the last 500 years there has been absolutely steady progress upwards. Now, bad things have happened, World War I, World War II, other big wars, 30-year wars, 100-year wars, bad. There was one of those wars, one of those European wars in the 1600s. 1 in 3 people in Germany were killed, Protestants versus Catholics. One in 3. Okay, you know how many Germans died in World War II? I think it's about 1 in 20. Okay, so now obviously the numbers were bigger because there was millions of people there. But I mean that I think that was the 100 Years of War. No, that was the 30 Years War. That was bad wars. But putting that aside, gee, look, we put man on the moon. We're going places. We're going places.
Okay. Well, firstly, at the same time as the 30-year war, there was also the Black Death. So a lot of people died for a lot of reasons at the time. That was a very bad century for the Western world. But putting that aside, I think you guys are misunderstanding me. The printing press was a great innovation, just like the internet was a great innovation, for the reason I say it gives us a fighting chance. It allows us to win sometimes. I don't think it guarantees us winning, because people pushing narratives for other reasons also have access to printing presses, and they also have access to the internet. So I'm not saying that those things were unimportant. They were crucially important, because without them, it's much harder for the truth to win out. But my point is, I guess I'd warn against the idea of assuming the truth wins out without us fighting. It wins out because we fight. And if people think the truth will just win out on its own, they may lose the motivation to go out and fight the good fight. So that's my slight pushback on that. That was a good discussion. We should clip that, put that up somewhere. That was fun, that back and forth. Slight change of pace then. Well, I waited for you to come back for this, Mr. Ruddick.
Well, can I just finish off? I believe mankind is going exponential now. I think the printing press really took us to a new level. I think the internet and AI is going to take us exponentially to the next level. So I reckon by the end of this millennia, I reckon we will have got to the point where we are flying around the solar system pretty frequently, and we're potentially colonizing, other planets. Look, I sort of do believe in God. Okay, it's unclear, but I think there's something going on, and I think it's possible that this whole solar system is sort of like a little. It's got all the nutrients we need in it to sort of be able to go outside of the solar system, outside of the galaxy eventually. So that's what I think. That's the direction I think we're heading on.
So deviating into religion as well. Look, I don't want to go too far into various black pills about what comes next, but if we do centralize political power enough, I think there is a real risk to human freedom, and therefore a risk to human flourishing. I fear the trend in politics is towards ever greater centralization, and I worry that there are very few institutional barriers to that happening eventually. And for it to stop, we're going to have to fight the good fight. But I hope you're right. Yeah. I hope you're right. Let's all move into space. So at least get to Mars. We need to start terraforming. Go, Mr. Musk. Slight change of topic. Significant change of topic then. The by-elections, gent. The last topic before we'll go to the questions from the audience. We've had one. We're having one more this weekend. It'll be worthwhile unpacking that and see what we think about it. John, I assume you were watching these quite closely. The Nepean by-election in the Victorian Parliament. It was supposed to be a close race between the Liberals and One Nation. It ended up not being that close. Do you have any takeaways from that, or do you want to tell our listening audience what happened there?
One Nation has recently been able to attract some really, really high quality candidates, and I'm thinking Barnaby Joyce and Cory Bernardi. Okay, and this is very encouraging. Okay, for One Nation. Okay, now they have had, and look, Malcolm and Pauline are legends. Now, but look, it's really difficult being a little minor party trying to grow, and one of the problems is finding quality candidates. Now, the Nepean One Nation candidate looked like a really true blue Aussie great guy who I'd really enjoy having a beer with. Now, I don't think he was ready for prime time. Now, the problem you have with a little party is attracting quality candidates. Now, I looked at that guy and I just thought, look, you know, he's not going to be a big vote winner here. And the Liberals won the seat quite comfortably. However, the interesting thing is that was the Mornington Peninsula, a reasonably wealthy part of Melbourne, and he still got 22%. So with a substandard candidate, and in a place that you'd normally not think, well, that's One Nation territory, that's telling me the baseline's 22%. Pretty good. I thought that was a very good result for One Nation. I also think the Liberals are going to win the Victorian election, okay? Because I think that things are starting to get to the point where people are saying, you know, okay, we can really feel that things are going bad here, and so I think that, you know, and that Victorian Premier doesn't look very impressive. Now, in relation to Farah, well, I think they have it. Now, I know he's had negative press. He's had a couple of little stumbles. The bottom line is David Farley is an extremely impressive person. And he's new to politics. He wouldn't remember me, but when I left school in the end of 1988, I went and worked on a cotton farm on the edge of the outback, but near Walgett. At the time, it was the biggest cotton farm in the Southern Hemisphere. It was a magnificent place to work. You know, very well paid, and like 300 John Deere tractors. All back then were worth about 200 grand.
Wow!
Just beautiful things. You know, just like these massive tractors, right? And you could steer them. You could steer them with your little pinky, and it was an extremely impressive farm. Who built that farm? David Farley built that farm in his 30s, and they ended up selling it for about $300 million. And when I finished university, I wrote to David Farley and I said, look, David, you wouldn't remember me. We'd met once or twice on the farm. I mean, there was sometimes hundreds of people working there. I said, but look, I really love the farm. And he had a big corporate office here in Sydney because it was a big operation. I said, look, I've just finished a university degree. I'd love to come and have a discussion with you to see if you've got a place for me in your office. And he wrote back, he said, John, by all means, come in and say hello. And, and he was, you know, because I'd had the university experience and then I'd had on the farm experience. So he rang me up and it was all looking very good. Now, 15 minutes before I walked into that office, talk about a sliding doors moment, the newly elected member for Parramatta rang me up, Ross Cameron. He said, John, do you want to work for me? So I thought I was going to go and have this agricultural corporate career with David Farley. So I had to walk into David Farley's office because John Howard just got elected 2 weeks earlier. It was an exciting time. And so I said to David Farley, and I said, look, mate, I was hoping to be able to work for you. It would have been a great honour, but the Howard government's just got elected and I've just been offered a job there. And he said, oh, well, he said, John, that sounds better. So it was all over in 5 minutes. So he wouldn't remember it, but he was an impressive guy and he's a One Nation candidate. So he is going to win because if you meet David Farley, like a lot of people have in Farah, you're just going to meet him. You're going to say, okay, I like this guy. He's impressive. And he is impressive. So I think he's going to just win it easily. I know the Sydney Morning Herald is out to bring him down. They are manufacturing BS about him. And but I'm sure that the people of Farah are going to win big time, and that's going to be a big moment for One Nation. Probably going to mean if they win, I reckon they'll be getting high 30s primary vote. I reckon they'll do better than the polling says. And I think that then that will result in Barnaby Joyce running for New England, where I grew up, and I believe he'll win that easy. And so, you know, let's see how the whole One Nation thing unfolds.
So Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce?
Look, I predict that there's going to be, I predict 5 to 10 years of chaos on the right in Australian politics. And at the end of that, I predict a big Democratic Party where the members get to vote for the parliamentary leader. And I think that's and then we can't unite all the parties around policy. Okay, whereas, you know, all the parties on the right agree on 85% of stuff, but like me and Jared Rennick don't believe, he loves tariffs, I hate them, okay? And so we think, okay, But Jared and us and Pauline and the Libs and the Nats and the shooters, the Christians, everybody, they can all, maybe Clive Palmer, will throw him in there as well. They can all be united under a big, big, big democratic tent, which I
outlined. Interestingly, I think Tony Abbott has supported your push for this. John Ruddick is the author of Make the Liberal Party Great Again, where he pitched for the centre-right party of government to be far more internally democratic. And I believe Tony Abbott came around to your way of thinking and is now in line to potentially be the national president of the Liberal Party. So that could be an interesting moment, JR, maybe one step towards that. Can I just say, previously you said 50-50 for Angus Taylor winning, or at least the right winning. So if One Nation is going to start having major breakthroughs in half of the Liberal seats, you're predicting 45 seats to the Liberals, 30 seats to One Nation, and a grand coalition to potentially get over the Labor Party. Is that one possibility?
Yeah, well, that's the ballpark. I think the Libs and the Nats will end up with more seats in the House of Representatives after the next federal election. But I think the One Nation will end up with a lot more seats than the Nationals. Now, what will happen? What will go against the? There's someone from Tamworth. Okay, well, I grew up in Tamworth, so what's this? The election this week will be fascinating. Yeah, good on you, Rick, Matt. 2333. Sorry, where were we? Oh yeah, after the federal election. Well, look, I think what will happen is, so the polls might say that a lot of these, particularly on the outer metropolitan and the regional rural areas, that the polls are saying that One Nation will win. And I think in a majority of cases they will. But there will be National Party and Liberal Party federal members who are popular in their local electorate. So their party may not be popular, but they personally are popular. And so in some cases, they will be able to resist that trend. But I think the Nationals are in mega trouble, as we're going to find. Yeah. Because, the Nats are going to come fourth in Farah. Okay. And now there's very few seats in Australia that are more National Party than Farah, and they're going to come fourth, and I think Matt Canavan's terrific, but that's just the reality.
Yeah, I think the National Party might be over after this, by the way. I think it could be One Nation just replaces the Nats and plays the role the Nats did as the minor coalition partner. Although they'd be aiming for major coalition partner, it depends who can win out in the outer metro regions. The Nepean shows that the Liberals have the edge still in the outer metro regions, which your scenario in play there, John. But I struggle to see which seats the Nats can win at all. They're behind in the polls in every seat except two of the seats they hold. If Matt Canavan runs in Capricornia, is the lower house seat where he lives, he'll have a personal following there, and he's a great candidate. But I got to say, having the difference between a great candidate and a thoroughly terrible candidate for a major party is like 4 or 5%. It matters, and a lot of seats are won by a couple of percent, so that matters. You definitely want a good candidate. But if you're looking at swings of 30%, then that 4% is going to struggle to get you. But Matt Canavan came in as the leader of the Nats. I imagine Farah likes Matt Canavan, and it moved the Nats from, I think, about 3% up to 6% in Farah. That's great. They're on their way up. It's rounding errors compared to the what moves elections. Sorry, Gene, you were about to say?
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask about Canavan because I think he's clearly the great talent on the right. So, I mean, he's got to be part of, if there's going to be a resurgence of the right in Australia, then Canavan is going to be part of it somewhere.
So, Gene, can I just say, you mean your present company excluded, of course. We have a right-wing politician in the room.
Oh, well, I mean, John Ruddick, yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're doing great things. So, yes, I mean, but I think talking about the national stage at the moment, John Ruddick, if you can get onto the national stage, absolutely, by all means, go for it. But yeah, I just wondering about Canavan, where he figures in all of it. But I mean, One Nation is just so strong at the moment, and it's got to do with the fact, I mean, people are concerned about the high level of immigration. I think we've talked about it enough, plenty on this show, what it means for. There's the economic impact, the congestion, there's the concerns about social cohesion. And since Bondi, everyone is just, very concerned about, what the high rate of immigration has meant. And over the years and what it means for the safety of the public. So yeah, that's what's driving One Nation's vote up for sure.
I would love to see Matt Canavan play a role in politics. I got to say that the caveat in what I said earlier is I still think there is. I've said this for a while. Like the interesting part of One Nation's trajectory will be the second half of this year, first half of next year. It's not these elections, right? They were always going to do well in South Australia, and they did. I think they're going to win Farah. The interesting thing will be once they've got enough interesting people in the mix, can they hold it together? Because historically, they haven't had a great track record of holding it together. They could very easily implode before the next federal election, or even before the next New South Wales state election, JR. So that's the thing to look out for, and then all bets are off, because who knows what will happen if that happens.
Well, look, because most pundits agree with what you're saying, and they're sort of anticipating that there'll be a collapse because it's happened before, or like, you know, they've gone up in the polls and they'll come down. No, look, I think we are in a new era, okay, that it will be. I think your scenario, Dr. John, about them becoming basically the new Nats and then basically the junior coalition partner, I think that's very feasible. That could very, very easily happen. What's happened to the poor old Nats is still lots of good members, but, you know, they have really become, you know, they used to be the farmers' party, people that actually owned farms, and they are now overwhelmingly the party of former staffers. Okay, and there's a difference.
Absolutely. And they have started attracting real talent, like you said before, the Barnaby Joyces and Corey Bernardis of the world. It kind of changes their level of professionalism internally. And there is the issue that where does the money and the skill go? If One Nation can stay high enough in the polls for long enough, then the money, the donors and the talent starts going to One Nation, because the donors and the talent don't want to hitch their efforts to a party that's going to be a 5% party and go nowhere. That's why it's so difficult for small parties to be able to attract that donation and talent. But if that starts going to One Nation instead of the Liberals, that starts to accentuate the trend. So that's the case there. But look, I just don't think we know the answer to that. I think there is a very viable path to One Nation imploding and a very viable path to them succeeding. I don't know how we predict which one's going to happen. It'll be a fun next 12 months to watch, because I think one way or the other we'll see it in the next 12 months. So anyway.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
Oh, no, you were there the whole time. I still saw you. JR, you're predicting a big One Nation victory for Farah. Gene, what's your crystal ball tell you?
Oh, yeah, One Nation will win Farah for the reasons I was talking about before. I think there's so much political momentum behind One Nation, and it's due to concerns about immigration and public safety. I mean, when people are fearful, they are going to look for, go for the candidates they think are going to protect them. And I think at the moment, people are making the judgment it's One Nation because they've had the consistent line on immigration. They've had the consistent line against extremism. And so that's who they think is most credible, and that's who they're going to vote for.
What do you guys make of the comments from Farley recently that perhaps the level of immigration of over 300,000 a year is the right amount, which seems to fly in the face of everything One Nation is about? I don't know if he was misquoted or if he tripped over, but how should we interpret that?
Oh, well, look, I think he was accurately quoted, and I think, yes, it is contradictory to One Nation is saying. As you know, I believe in a 5-year immigration pause. Now, look, Farley's new to politics. That's the bottom line, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Now, when I worked on the cotton farm he had in the 1990s, I reckon half the labour force were foreigners, usually Irish and English and New Zealanders, Canadians, and and so so a lot of people's experience in the city of migrants can be not as positive, but in the country, when they're actually they're not really dull bludgers, they're out there picking apples, and driving a harvester and doing productive things. And that's the migrants that David Farley has come into contact with, and he's now down in the Riverina where they need people to pick oranges. They haven't yet got, they need people to pick apples and all these things, and strawberries and blueberries and everything else. And they need labour. And so he's thinking, well, these people that come in from Fiji and everywhere else are pretty reliable. So that's what he was thinking. So look, I believe at the pause because I'm worried really about too many people coming in at once who are not culturally compatible. It's probably not great economics, okay, but I do want to sort of have the pause and then have a 5-year debate about immigration. So it's not going to be back to business as usual. And there could well be some economic harm from that. But I'm more worried about social decay and social breakdown like we're seeing in Sweden and France and Germany, okay, and definitely parts of England. So that's why I'm thinking this is absolutely critical at this stage.
Yeah. So you don't think it'll have any much impact on the... Gene, did you see these comments? And do you think they'll have any role in the election?
Well, it wasn't...
I saw the comments. They seemed odd to me, but I don't think they'll have much of an impact, will they? I think he's still on track to win, from what I understand, and I think people will. It's just, it seems a bit strange what he said, but I think the impression people have of One Nation is it's already fixed, isn't it? I mean, people see it as Pauline Hanson's party, and people have strong views about what she stands for, and so I don't think it'll really affect the result that much. I think One Nation will still win.
If you really care about immigration so much that it's a vote changer for you, and you're a One Nation voter, and your candidate has said this, where he thinks it's great about foreign workers coming in and working on his farms, well, who else are you going to vote for? You're going to say, I'm going to vote for the Teal now. No, they're still going to vote One Nation. That's what they're going to do.
Well, maybe they'd vote for Matt Canavan's National Party, but then the preferences would end up going back, because you're right. At the end of the day, it looks like the two-party preferred is going to be the Teal versus One Nation, as on current polling. It was interesting, by the way, in the Nepean election, the two-party preferred ended up being Liberals versus the Independent. One Nation fell out of the two-party preferred there. I think that was interpreted by some as a bit of a disappointment, but it did represent 25% primary vote in an outer metro region for One Nation. So I think that's not necessarily the sky falling from One Nation's perspective. We're coming up to 2 hours, so let's dive into the questions if you guys agree. Well, firstly, if there's something else you desperately want to say on the by-elections, feel free to interrupt me.
Just on what John was saying about the economic issues, I think we've probably reached the point where the level of immigration has gone well beyond what is economically beneficial to the existing population and economically beneficial in per capita terms. So, John, you were always talking about the need to look at things in a per capita terms. And so while the additional migration and population may be adding to GDP, I think it's actually detracting from the living standards or the quality of life of the existing population. It's just been at such excessive levels. So that's what I'd say there in terms of economic impact.
Yes, I think it probably depends on who you're bringing over and where you're putting them for the economic impact. But I agree. I don't think there's any evidence that the total amount of immigration is a net benefit to the economy at the moment, although it certainly helps the government's bank balance. They get a budget benefit out of the immigrants. But we covered that on a previous one. So let's look. One comment I need to quickly address, McCarthy, if you're there. I did get a message earlier saying my X account has been hacked. I did try to log in and I can't. So I have been hacked. What you're receiving right now is not coming from me. I have been live on this show the entire time that my account has been hacked. So whatever you're getting now is not from me. I apologize. Once this show's over, I'm going to go back and I don't know how you do it, Rob. You're a guru on the internet. Maybe I'll call you and you can help me try and get my X account back. But yes, I am aware it is not me. If you know anyone who's getting weird messages from my X account, please let them know that it's not me. But yes. Now, on to the rest of the questions that have come in. I'll go back to start at the beginning, so we'll backtrack to a few earlier topics. I think you highlighted this one, Gene, what the CGT changes may apply to all assets, including businesses and stocks. Very concerning for the small business environment. My thought is this would produce oligopolies. Gene, do you want to take this? or just say yes?
Well, I think we covered this when we talked about the startups and the concern about what it means for startups. And I actually thought of that because of Taylor's comment there. So Taylor, thanks for watching and for commenting. That's what made me think of that, and I made sure that made me raise that in the conversation we had earlier. So yeah, absolutely. I think that was probably something the government didn't expect. But the startups are, they're really going to push back on the CGT change, and the government needs to think about, well, what can it do to accommodate them or make them less mad. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens next Tuesday.
Indeed, that is one to look out for, as we mentioned earlier. Anna, the state only has to print inflation once every while for it to have a decade-long effect. COVID, I think that is, was a financial coup d'etat. I don't know about a coup d'etat, but it did have long-lasting negative economic effects that we are all paying the price for now. And these are consequences. The people who are saying, what does it matter? Just mask up, just shut down, just everyone go crazy during COVID. You know, better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Well, we are now experiencing the sorry. And I just, I hope next time around when the sky starts falling,
I've got to go.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Thanks for joining us.
Love.
All right. Immigration has meant that Aussie wages have been stagnant since 76. I don't think it actually is since 76, but they have been stagnant for a long time now.
Since probably around 2016. Yeah, because haven't we looked at the data on GDP per hour worked, and roughly it's where it was.
Well, that's GDP per hour worked. But you also, for well-being, you also have to look into the fact that bracket creep, it takes an increasing percentage of your income.
Yeah.
So your total income might be nice, but your disposable income, especially when you factor in rents, it hasn't been pretty. But I don't think it's quite since 76. But quibbling about those sort of details aren't really the point. It has been a bad experience in recent years. The economy is not working like we grew up expecting it to. Look, by the way, a point on this. I remember the argument, and it made sense at the time, where people said if the government runs a deficit and goes into debt to build a piece of productive infrastructure, future generations will benefit from that, and future generations are going to be much richer than us. And that was something that 20 years ago, if you said it and you understood the data, it looked like a normal thing to say. It looked true. You know, we are orders of magnitude richer than our grandparents. Our grandchildren will be orders of magnitude richer than us, was a reasonable assumption and expectation. And on that expectation, getting your grandkids to pitch in to pay for some of the infrastructure seemed like a reasonable ask.
Yeah.
That logic is disappearing, right? If we are in a new normal where you can no longer expect the next generation to live a better life than you, then it becomes harder to say that next generation should also have to pitch in for capital investment decisions being made today. So we may have to rethink the moral justification for the high level of debt that we're passing on to future generations. Anyway.
Good point, John.
Dub says not a recession yet, but wait for the budget. Smack more nails into you. Yeah, well, we will wait and see. Although, interestingly, as you heard me saying before, I did find a series of things where they get half a pat on the back. So I'm going to wait for the details, right? I've been disappointed enough by politicians not to start cheerleading them too early. And there are clearly some dark spots in this budget coming. So let's wait and see. I think we posted this one earlier from Anna saying, go ahead and sell the uranium, just don't have a nuclear industry. Look, as John Ruddick said earlier, he kind of expected that to be the outcome, right? He put up a bill that said, have a nuclear industry and have a uranium mining industry. And he expected the compromise that he'd need to make is that Labor might come back and say, no nuclear, but okay, you can have uranium. And he was kind of hopeful that that might be the outcome because it's better than nothing. It looks like Labor's going to give him nothing on what they're currently saying. But look, if he could get half the win, that would certainly be worth supporting. I think we've already had these ones. Taylor, from my understanding, is that the service cuts will migrate to another program called Thriving Kids. Oh, this is the NDIS, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I would have thought some of the cuts would shift back to the states, but if you're saying it's called Thriving Kids and has one title, it sounds like it's a federal program.
Well, I think they are trying to push back the costs to a significant extent on the states, and I think the logic is that it'll be less expensive than if they were on the NDIS and they were entitled to all, they'd get an NDIS package and all the NDIS support. So the idea is that we'll have it as some type of state government program and that it'll be less expensive. So, and I think there'll have to be a funding deal between the states and the Commonwealth that has to be worked out for that. But the idea is definitely that they'll try and cut the costs, but see how successful they are at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Taylor's onto a bit of a sleight of hand here. I mean, I don't know anything about it. We'll have to look into Thriving Kids and check the details in the budget.
Yeah.
As Sinclair said before, he suspected a sleight of hand, where they'd make an announcement that allowed them to book savings in the budget, and then they would set up another way to actually sprinkle out the money and therefore not actually make the savings in reality. So again, like I am thankful that they are at least using the language of NDIS spending restraint, because that's the first step, is to at least normalize that sort of language. And now we need to see some follow through. So they get, one pat on the back for the language. We will withhold the full 3 cheers until we see actual progress.
The first step is admitting you've got the problem in the first place. I agree with, that's true. Yeah. It's
just occurred to me that this name here may actually be 2 people, a couple called Lynn and Don. Or maybe it's Lyndon. I have no idea. But anyway, somewhere I have the safety stats for an early UK wind farm. Crazy. The thing is they called, this is about the deaths. The deaths from wind farms. Yes.
Oh my God. An ice throw. Oh dear. Oh no.
More dangerous, even more dangerous than falling vending machines. So that is dangerous. So
I can see how that would be dangerous. Yeah.
Will they be fixing our highways? They shouldn't. That's a state government responsibility. But you should definitely hit up your state government for the next budget. All of the state budgets will be coming out.
There are some national highways, aren't there, John, where this federal government does contribute to the Bruce, but I don't think the Cunningham Highway is one, is it? I'll have to look into that. I honestly don't know.
Well, they're able to contribute to any of them, and they do contribute to a lot of road funding. I don't think they should, but yes, they do contribute to some funding. What they do is hand the money to the states, and the states still literally do the work. So they don't have any federal government employees filling potholes. But yeah, absolutely. That would be a good idea in and of itself anyway. I think this was in response to when I was talking about the control over the narrative, Operation Mockingbird. I'm not an expert on Operation Mockingbird, but I believe it was now what used to be a secret scheme of the CIA. It's since become public. So I believe it's since become public, and it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's now a conspiracy fact that the CIA had a program to pay journalists to push CIA-approved narratives, which when people first hear these, they sometimes they think conspiracy theory, roll their eyes. But realistically, if you were in the CIA, wouldn't you do that? That seems logical. Now, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I don't want them to be doing it. I don't think the CIA should exist. Shut it down and replace it with nothing, in my opinion. But I find it easy to believe because it's what a rational CIA would do, and I assume there's at least a few smart people in organizations like that.
Hopefully, I mean, this stuff actually. I mean, it actually happened. It all came out in wasn't it the church committee hearings in the mid-70s in the US? I mean, so yeah, all of this stuff sort of has come out. I mean, yeah, clearly they were acting in a very they're essentially a rogue agency for many years, and that's why they.
You think it's a rogue agency, team? You don't think they do it anymore? You think the CIA went fully legit and crossed their hearts and promised to only?
Well, they're still doing. They're obviously still doing covert action overseas, but under the law, they're not allowed to operate domestically. Whereas once upon a time, they were operating domestically, Now I know
you know as well as
who
I, it's
knows?
Snowden revealed that they're spying on their own citizens. Everyone knows the CIA spies on their own citizens now. They don't have to follow the law apparently. And the idea of if they promise us, double plus promise us that their fully secret budget is only being used for benevolent purposes, that we can double plus trust them, I find it's one of the odder features of conservative mindset, that you can just give the people this amount of power, and if they say trust me bro, you go, oh yeah, fair enough.
Well, you need oversight, and you need
where's the oversight?
Guardrails.
There's never been a head of the oversight committee in the US Parliament that hasn't been fully on the hook to CIA before they got there. And none of it's public. None of it's public. So the oversight just comes from a few politicians that know where their bread is buttered. Anyway, we're getting distracted. But yes, Operation Mockingbird. If you haven't heard of it, look that one up. What is this one? I'm guessing all three panelists align with Rebel News. Trudeau decided to only allow state-approved media outfits at his press conference. I don't know how much I align with Rebel News. I don't really watch them. I think they're probably a bit more pro-war than I am instinctively. But yes, you have to decide who gets to come into your press conferences, I guess. So you have to draw a line somewhere. I don't think I trust where Trudeau draws the line by the natural instinct. But I mean, Rebel News seems to be part of the story of the evolving media landscape. I like the existence of alternative media. It doesn't mean I like every alternative media organization, though. This is a good point in terms of that sort of control of the center and that blocking new competitors. Like if you give subsidies to existing players, it makes it harder for new players to come in. That's what we see with political parties as well. Massive subsidies to existing political parties makes it very hard for new political parties to break into the system. That's massively true in America. It's true in our country as well to some degree. The established parties get paid thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars every election, whereas upstart parties do not. And that's exacerbated in, I think, for instance, the Victorian system, where they basically make it's almost illegal to raise money. You can only use the money the government gives you, and the government gives you money based on your previous performance. So that really is a protection of the incumbents against competition. All done, they say, in the name of having fair elections because money isn't involved. No, it's just incumbency that's involved, which is, I don't know how that's any better. All right. Anna is not a fan of Joyce and Bernardi, not high quality. Look, compared to what I would say there, Ruddick is high quality. Yeah, I think Ruddick's one of the more interesting, innovative thinkers, as a genuinely smart guy and willing to have the arguments. So I give a lot of time, a lot of credit to any politicians who don't just respond with, yeah, but look at the opinion polls. Haha, look, I'm more popular than you. They respond with actually trying to engage the ideas. And even if I think they're wrong, the fact that we're having an argument of ideas means I'm instinctively going to give that politician more credit than the others. And I've had that with, I don't know Barnaby Joyce, but one of the first times I met Cory Bernardi, and his incentive was to try and show that he agreed with me because he was a politician. I raised something, we ended up arguing about it for an hour. So, we were arguing the idea. Same with Ruddick. I've been on the phone with him for hours, just arguing, disagreeing. We agree on 90% of things, and we spend the whole conversation arguing, which shows that we're both pursuing the idea. So credit to both of those men for behaving like that. Looks like there's been a bit of back and forth on the... Sorry, just cleaning this up. I like Ruddick, but he reminds me of Barry Jones. Yeah. One Nation is full of the most uninspiring people in Australian history. I get more out of listening to a Green. Well, look, I'll say this for the Greens. I don't think it's true for all of them. But I found when I used to argue with Greens, they also used to argue the ideas. I mean, they would be socialists. I think their ideas are not just slightly wrong, but dangerous and terrible. But I remember very early on, for the older people in the crowd who can remember the Democrats, I ran an election in the ACT. I think it was the first election that the Libertarians ever ran in back in 2001. And there was the Democrats and the Greens that we were going up against. And every time we talked ideas with the Democrats, they would have this blank look on their face going, yeah, but Natasha Stott Despoja is popular, and those are very big words you're using. Yeah, maybe I agree with the compromise of everything you say. Like totally vacuous, sort of Kevin Rudd-esque bullshit. Whereas the Greens, I think, were wrong on everything, but they engaged the ideas. They went back and forth. They tried to make a case for the government ownership and control of everything. They knew what the words meant. So the Democrats were probably less left-wing, but I ended up leaving with more respect for the Greens because they engaged in ideas. But I don't want to give them too much credit because their ideas are scary. I wish JR was here to see this. There's John Ruddick. Anna says she gave Mr. Craddock a bit of a bath last time he was here, so full credit for him for returning. Absolutely. And I think that's about it for the ones that I had starred. Let's see if anything came in.
Well, one comment is from Rick Matt at 2333. Yep. Yeah, it was. Is it $7.50 a vote, is it?
I think that wasn't the number that I remember. It was about half that I remember. But he may be saying that you do get a vote in the Senate and the lower house. So per person, if you get over 4% in both the Senate and the lower house, and someone walks into the polling booth and votes for you on both the green and the white ballot paper, then yeah, it's a nice payday. But it's only for the bigger parties. All right, I think that's a pretty good session. So, Gene, the last thing we normally say as we're closing out, what, if anything, have you taken from this chat? What did you enjoy? What did you learn? What did you...
I enjoyed the discussion we had about whether it's upward, whether we're guaranteed to be on the upward trajectory. And I think you make the good point that, well, it's definitely not guaranteed. I mean, I'm very positive about things, but we need to make sure that we keep fighting for good ideas and against all of the silly ideas that are out there, and against those forces that want to drag us back, including forces that want to drag us back to the 7th century. So I think we need to keep making those arguments. So, yep, I like that discussion.
Indeed. Can I say it? I'll repeat it again for anyone who's here at the end, but not the beginning. Near the beginning of this live stream, Gene ran through the economic roundup, the economic data, as he always does. I hope you tune in every Thursday evening to get that economic data dump. But it's very interesting unpacking effectively the different CPIs for different segments of society. And I think that's an undervalued piece of data there. And I really think more people need to see that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Mr. Gene. And thank you, dear sirs, for... thanks, Boris. I'll go back and watch the start now, as you should. Yes, that was very interesting data. It showed that there's a lot of people suffering more than the CPI data says they're suffering, which we all instinctively know, but it's good to be able to actually look at that in some detail. What's going on here? All right. Thank you, Gene, for joining me. Thank you, John Ruddick, for coming in earlier. He's not here now, but thank you for making yourself available on a sitting day. So Parliament is still sitting, or actually it might be closing now. And thank you, dear viewer, for joining in. Thank you for the people who are writing the comments. You help to make this work. We do this every Thursday at 8 p.m. I just said we do this every Thursday. I will immediately put a caveat on that to say that we won't be for the next roughly the next month. So we'll be taking about 4 weeks off from our usual programming. But do look out for us. You'll still be getting our emails. If you want to make sure you know what we're up to, please do follow us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and most importantly, follow us on Substack, the Oz Taxpayers, AUS taxpayers.substack.com. You follow us there. You can sign up for free. We don't inundate you with emails, but it is a great way for us to be able to reach you when it's needed. So with all of that said, I will not see you next week, Thursday. We may try to duck in after the budget if time permits, but I will end this one differently by saying I'll see you next time. And until then, stay happy and stay free.